Robin Jones. I'm your 2020 past president of BDAR. I'm here today to provide you with a real estate market watch update. So as you can see, we're going to go over a year-over-year comparison between 2020 and 2019 and a month-over-month comparison of a 12-month overview of Barrie and Simcoe and area. And we're going to give you a brief introduction and invite to a 2020 market outlook session, which will be coming up soon. So just to get us started here, this is our 2020 overview, basically looking year over year, 2020 versus 2019. We've isolated this data in terms of market data for total Simcoe, Barrie on its own, and total Simcoe excluding Barrie. So the first graph to the left of your screen is the number of units sold. And as you can see right across the board, we're up dramatically overall, but perhaps a little bit more dramatically in total Simcoe, which is excluding Barrie. Now, average price, and remember, this is the average of all 12 months of 2020 versus the average of all 12 months of 2019. We're looking at a price increase that's more dramatic in total Simcoe, which is pushed by a even greater dramatic increase in prices of total Simcoe excluding Barrie of almost $100,000, bringing the average price excluding Barrie from $513 to $615, so almost $100,000 worth of capital increase in value on the average property. This is less than Barrie, as you can see, and overall that just brings the average down slightly less than $100,000 increase in value for units in these areas. The 2020 overview provides us with a more micro look at the marketplace over the course of the year. And of course, it was a year to be remembered and hopefully to be forgotten by a lot of us for various other reasons. But for most of us, it was a very active marketplace in the sales business. The average sale price, as we knew in the first couple of months, was pretty heading towards an increase in values on a fairly steady basis, just on the heels of 2019. But that we all took a side step for that in April when we had our first lockdown. Now I can say it that way. And we reduced our volume of units available, which also translated to units of volumes of sale of almost half of what they were in March. But as we opened our doors a little bit more in May, things started to come back, and the average price increase went to $545, which was sort of in line with what you might have considered to be a typical increase from what we were seeing in March and February. So prices just continued to increase in that string. But then June came about and we were back in full force for the most part, all following COVID protocols. Our influx of listings increased dramatically, but demand was pent up. For various reasons. We saw a lot of influx from Toronto buyers, indicating 50 to 60% of the buyers were coming from the GTA, trying to get away from the COVID issues that they were facing down there. And they were also being freed up to come up here, obviously because they were able to work from their homes. And that was providing a lot of influx of people from the GTA. June and July followed that same trend. As you can see by the stats, the data is more dependable with the number of units sold when we are looking at over 1,000 units sold in June and July and August and even into September. But again, September started to come around and we were looking at pending second wave. Our volume of listings dropped dramatically and our months of inventory went back down to 0.7. Again, pushing prices up with highly competitive marketplace. And now we were still continuing this trend from beginning in June to September, increasing at a couple of percent per month in terms of prices. October continued the trend, but the listings started to dip. And as we were heading into November and we were looking at even more stringent lockdown procedures coming in and zones, the zoning classification, red zones, we saw our inventory continue to drop as people stayed at home, and of course schools were back and winter comes upon us. As we know, generally our Novembers, Decembers are pretty slow. And December was certainly a reflection of that, with our inventory once again dropping dramatically to half of what it was a few months before, just like it happened in April with our second lockdown pending. And but the demand kept going, and we ended up with half a month's worth of inventory, and prices just were ramped up in a fashion I've never seen before in my 33 years in this business, going from an average of $649 to an average of $697. Now, I wouldn't really depend on that average as being something we're going to see continue through a long time. As I mentioned, the more we have in the sample, the more accurate it can be. So when we have 1,000, 1,100 units being sold, we end up with a more contiguous sample that creates a more dependable average. Going into December, we had 515 units sell, but in Simcoe County, 63 of those units were over $1 million. Whereas, 724 units in November, of which 52 units were over $1 million. And in October, with almost 1,000 units, only 29 units were over $1 million. So December, with almost 20%, 15% of the units over $1 million, that pushed that average, in a very high fashion, and often offset it. And we'll see that actually comes out of Simcoe County General rather than in Barrie itself. Okay, looking at this next slide, 2020 overview, which is Simcoe County residential real estate activity in general. We'll see the average price here in December was over $700,000. And again, when you're looking at the units sold in the brown graph, that basically, as the numbers were more stable, the graph was more a stable increase year over year, looking at almost 20% over the course of the year. But now we're looking at the average price for the whole county, including Barrie, at over $700,000. Again, I don't necessarily believe in the long run, over the course of the next few months, that's the way it's going to pan out. But right now we are in a very low supply situation, and demand is still high. We're seeing multiple offers still, and the odds are, with a low supply and low volume, probably is going to happen in January. We're going to still see that price range hovering in around that range. Again, driven by the sales over $1 million. Looking at Barrie on its own, the prices are a little bit more contiguous. Barrie's marketplace is a little bit more heterogeneous compared to the county in general, where there's a lot of people that have been buying in the rural areas, especially, like I say, coming from the GTA, looking to buy properties that have some land and some more unique features. So our average price starting in January at $509, ending up at $662 in December. Although it was $604 in November was the average. Most likely, if you might be best to look at this as a combined average between November and December. Probably around $630 is probably a more adjusted sample. Still, we're looking at an increase of over 20% over the course of this year, which is much of a surprise by the press. But we see a lot of doom and gloom in the marketplace, which doesn't necessarily seem to be evident based on the lack of supply and the high demand that continues. Okay, 2020 overview, just looking at Barrie in general rather than the entire county on its together. Barrie's seen a more contiguous price increase over the course of the year, but not necessarily as dramatic. Again, I believe the county high prices over $1 million have skewed the overall average. So this is more of a reflective of a marketplace that's following a general trend. And we're seeing average sale prices in the high 600s, but overall it's a little bit more contiguous. Again, drilling down on this, we see the average price for Simcoe County, excluding Barrie, for 2020, showing an average price in December of $716, where it was $671 in November. Again, you're looking at this number with 336 sales is a pretty low sample to draw conclusions from, especially when we had so many sales over $1 million to throw that average in a higher fashion. So when you are dealing with your clients, you really want to make sure that you're offering, a CMA that shows that particular property rather than the market in general. Again, the overview map shows the dramatic differences in between the volume that occurred through the months. This sort of also supports the ideology that perhaps the GTA buyers are generally going outside of Barrie's proper and heading more into the county and rural areas, because it does seem to be the push for sales in those areas, and the price increases have been more dramatic. So that was quite a year we ended up having. I know many of us were glad to have a little bit of a break at Christmas, although we couldn't visit our families as much as we would have liked to. But we seem to be on the heels of a recovery that may be slower than we hoped for. But in any event, we know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I look forward to us all being able to relish in some more normalcy to come back to our lives. I'd like to thank you all very much for everything you've done over the past 10 months as an association, as members, and as individuals. You've done a remarkable job at protecting yourselves, your families, and the public. And I'd just like to remind you that during the lockdown, that open houses are prohibited, and that we encourage you to use all the virtual tools you have at your disposal that you've been great to create. And when we first started this process, and when you're marketing the property, follow all those safety protocols, including keeping your distance, physical distancing, screening, personal protective equipment, cleaning and disinfecting, and face covering equipment whenever you are in a public forum. So coming up on the 21st of January, we're going to do a market outlook by Ben Robideau is going to come and talk to us virtually, and we hope you sign up for that as soon as you can and join us for that virtual meeting. And I'm sure Ben will be doing an update over the next couple of weeks as things continue to change in this marketplace. I wish you all happy selling and a safe and happy 2020, and look forward to seeing you in person when the time allows us to. Take care.